heavens opened up in my head.
You didn't bring this up. You didn't see. You did this.
Expect we will not see Sarah. We were supposed to recover this morning.
Spoon?
Hey!
That looked like a spoon. The glasses.
Oh, it's like carrying one.
All right, the red books at the end. Yeah, 3 of those. So Ella, what prayers do you know?
All of them.
Oh.
Well, let's see. How about Ashrei? You know Ashrei?
What do you say about it?
Okay. So when we start in a minute or two, will you help us with Ashrei?
Yes.
Or with someone to help you? Okay. Someone will help you with Ashrei. Because you have about, by my reckoning, you have 2 weeks. So we are right there. So anything you don't know, you have 13 days to figure out. You related? Yes. How about you do Ashrei with help and Elaine by yourself? I think that's a good plan. Ella's like, what did I get suckered into?
It's good practice for 2 weeks. You'll be here by
You can just say you're really playing with this for the next time. So the God is going to he likes the God.
I guess they're sharing one of the news. Go on some. Yeah, put some pressure.
All right, Ella, I think it is that time. You're going to come up and we'll help you with Ashrei. It's 2:14. Familiar? Ashrei Shabbat Afternoon Alright, page 216. Half cottage, no? Alright, guys, hold on a sec, we're like a step behind here. Any Cohens or Levies in the house that I don't know about? Regular Jews.
Yes, it is, that's right.
Yeah.
We always have so many.
Alright.
Okay. Just look at her, yeah.
Alright, just anyone like to practice their Torah things?
Even sorrow, my other Mashiach, no, this way that this is an economy, but that is a Torah, why not Yerushalayim, works in the Torah, Amo Yisrael, Bifidu Shato. Adonai, Tula v'Hakebula v'Hatiferet v'Netzach v'Elom ki kol v'shamayim v'Haaretz Adonai Mamlaka v'Haminaseh.
How do you fill in? How do you fill in the second rabbi for us?
Adonai Elohim v'Yishtachavu v'Yishtachavu v'Ha'am Ha'Hashem V'Amenu Adonai Elohim v'Yishtachavu v'Yishtachavu v'Ha'am Ha'Hashem Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Elohim.
Alright, we are parsha by Yugash. If you want to stand in the second. He's gonna be on your Yugash.
Amen. I'll call we go to the Torah, Elchanan Meir, Israel, Litman, HaKohen, Rosh Hashanah Torah, I'm expecting to be Shanto. And Kupen Hayo.
Yugash. Amen. Yugash. Elav Yudah. Vayoma. Vyarani. Yiraverna Abdata. The Pardes. Nila Karpava Abdata. Kikamoko Kiparo. Anani Shal Devada. When more Yesham Abba. Anamar Anani. Yesam Abba King. We are speaking Paton. Defi met. Yoder Kukuda Limo. Lima. Yali. Ahero.
Okay, right. What?
Just do the blessing. Amen. Amen. But Somer of the Favori do, I was my night, no more irony. Though you call Hannah over the details of the people made, but Somer of the fact you know your rest, no matter when you can look to see them. I, the Alvino of the Avi, when I was a different Adoni. Alright. She regarded me. I hope that when we're low, you call it in your shocking Makatani Kanu, we are at New Kilo, you call her, and each shocking Makatani in Kanu, and the Adi, Alenu, Alenu, Matilda, each night build up each, but it's a 5 meaty, Omar after of Ravel or 80, Ivana, like a Tim Gum at 7 in Panai, the girl, some recommended Tigrash, Ola. ותקו אליו אבי והנערים, ונפשו שורה ונפשו. Among you have the Torah.
Hallelujah.
These.
Bezot Torah Asher Shamoshe Livnei Yisrael
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Page 221.
Yalu Chimarama, Kiskoshko Levado, Odual Eretz, Vishamayim, Bayar Karen Liamo, Tila Kochasidah, Visra Provo, Alleluia, the David is more, Adonai Ortzema, David, Vinoshveva, Yisavra Amet Adonai, Vutstaka Melechikisha, Zedor Dor Shav Makin, Zushiach Mashiach, Inasu B'nei Allah, Yavo Melech HaKavod, Yisem Melech HaKavod, Adonai Yitzut Gibor, Adonai Gibor Bilchama, Zushiach Mashiach, Uziu B'nei Allah, Yavo Melech HaKavod, Yisem Melech HaKavod, Adonai Yitzvot, Melech HaKavod, Sem, Uvedo Yom. It's my belief, Asiva, the top Hema, Meushar, Erachema, Archena, Evametivotema, Sham, Ashivenu, Adonai, Elech Adonai, Ha'adesh, Ha'adesh Yomenu, Ha'adesh Yomenu, Kekedim.
All right, we are turning to page 222 for the half Kaddish.
Yikada, Shemei Rabba,
Amen.
Yomadi Rafi, Nifmachute, Chayfun, Chayfun, Yisrael, Lagos, Mongaridi, Ru, Amen. Yeshmer Baraf, Elamai, Yagis, Baraf, Pork, not say, Darkness lights all 22 shop,
Very good.
Leilani Kodak, Shirata, Tushbek, Nakamata, Yamirandilma, Yisru, Amen.
Page 223 through 229. And unfortunately, you've got to do a little bit of flipping. On 228, you'll see the note to turn ahead for Al Hanisim and then turn back.
No.
If you're still in your private prayer, please take as much time as you need. Others, please turn back to page 223.
Baruch Adonai, Elohim Eloheinu, Elohim Eloheinu Yaakov, Elohim Eloheinu, Gomel Masikunim Kaneko, Zoper Hasi Elohim Elohim Machmo Bi'Ava, Elaposeh Oshiel Again, Baruch Adonai, Magin Abraham, Atari Gordon, I'm making my Torah, Hoshia, Mashi Ura, Korea Goshen. I'll kill manifest of everything Rachamim, Rabim, so faithfully, Malchira Surayan, Surin Kan, Tolchin Apar, people of the word of the Mela, and maybe the night must hit to Shua, and I want to like a young lady, more room, I talk, I know, but I am 18. Gadesh Shivilon, Shishmadish, Madam Shmeoron, Takatukan Yakava, Korosek, and Seviamar. That's what was brought in the Tamar of your neighbor.
Be seated.
I thought, you come to so good, but there's get too long. I tear it, you show him the food, Shalom, Taka. I'm going to get so your name, Yano, when I'm in the football. You fight on about the Gabam, the Fight and Nemana, the Hot Shalom, Shalom, I should go better. Nicholas, when short there would say, boy, I'm Kiru Banaka. You may play the Pato, Yam, the Pato, that you have shut that far. Oh, you know, Taylor, and say it to the Taylor, because you're going to need some chat. It will give her that, some mechanism to tap off. I really be able to talk to that man, I'm really the I love her, so Shabbat, Shabbat, if the voice was a kind of Shabbat, or Ruth, I don't know, you got here, Shabbat. The say I'm really not excused to a John, six over the day tap off. So don't know what I wrote some, you wrote some of the Dr. Strela tap off. Then you go to the Rahani in Boru, I taught Adonai, I'm Sirshina Taletsia, Motim, Anahapula, Chotopuna, Timla, Moed, so I gave a dog kilo, Polurapa, I'm thank you, 20 kilo, Polurapa. You'll come to us at well, give you law. Alani, Simela, Porkan, Yalgabura, Yalashua, Yalanacha, Sipla, Tina, Mahima, said, he may not show King Badon, Naila, Jonathan puts your lumber, Sean, for Israel, Skin for a tapa, Babir, little beards on that. And the rock of the regular dollar and waits Sorata. After it's been long, not to it, the after it's become come, sort of your Iliad, Kalashim, from Iliad, Mahati, today, Iliad, Tanobi, who show Iliad Sadi, in Iliad, Oskate or Atapa, the Pasita Shingle, all the Karosh, the Olam, after Israel, let's get to Shula, Guidola, Markakayo, Nase, the Arcade, Baru, but the Beard Tapo, Peter, as they call that part, the Tiharu, and Nico Shap, of the Nico Heroes, with that stroke of a Shap, which will not connect to the Kain, with the Hogos, Levish, Gado. Yalkula, this one, start to call, give to me along the way. The whole time you do the cell, the illusion women, the neighbors are taking the cell of our rules. I told you for the Lamado. Sean wrote this wrong for we speak to get to see me along. He taught that. Don't know how shalom. There'll be an another word, a place where the legal post on the map. Or root, Adonai. Adonai Israel, Vashalom.
Full cottage.
You can obviously get and why do you not give them I don't know how to be Israel, it's one to read Hebrew. Amen. Say, you did not do that to us, you do shop for your they love you, but don't sure that's the government. I'm not going to love Hebrew, amen. You got it out, so let's say, no, somebody's going to be fighting Hebrew, amen. The H one, I'm trying to have a little place where Hebrew, amen. Oh, say shalom, Hebrew, we are say shalom, oh, you know, Israel, in the road, amen.
Page 231.
Say to Allah, say Rishi, Shalom, Son, Shalom, Son,
We've been observing today the archetypes of Jonathan Barkin, Nathan Chipperstein, Muse Edelstein, Virginia Emanuel, Esther Cohen, Richard Halpern, Joanna Lowenthal, Sidney Morris, Helen Novick, Ruby Polzo, Thelma Sarles, Ben Senny, Henrietta Siegel, Jack Silverman, Ben Stern, Ben Wertheimer, Abraham Appel, Joe Bloom, Dora Mendel Fox, Martin Silverman. Keep all those names in mind. Warner's Cottage, page 232. Yikadal, Yikadash, Meraba, Be'ama, Dibrakute, Be'alikmakute, B'chayichan, B'yomechan, B'chayeda, B'et Yisrael, Ba'ala, Bisman Karim, Romin, Yiparach, Yishtabach, Yipar, Yipraman, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalal, Shmed Kudashah, Riku, Ve'ela, Min Kol Birkata, V'shirata, Yishbakata, V'nakmata, V'miram Yamav, V'maru, Yehesh, Rabami, Shmaya, V'chaim, Alinu, V'ko Yisrael, V'ramin, Oseh Shalom, Yimramav, Uyaseh Shalom, Alinu, V'kol Yisrael, V'maru, Amen. Thank you, everyone, for coming and making it happen. If people would like to stick around and study, we'll be doing Mariv and candlelighting and Havdalah at about 6:10. Shabbat's over 6:18. So if you want to stick around, I've got food and what to talk about. If not, I'm glad you're here for this much.
It is. It's in there, it's like nerves or.
Yeah.
Since we're gonna be slow on Monday, this manager take Lillian to the shooting range.
Oh, yeah.
So she'll get her first chance at the shooting range. Well, she'll go with Mike with the office manager, better trainer than I am. And she was like, so I didn't look at it to do John Wick. I'm like, she's John Wick.
Baruch Adonai, Elohim Haaretz.
She's done perfectly to that stuff. No, it is. I don't know if he's bringing it up on me. And then I said, "Do you want me?" And he's like, "No."
Right, just where that came from. I guess not. Let me find out.
Time we took my dad. Full trigger knows that and goes, hey, and I was getting right next to him, and then he went back around his hand on the table, like, don't bring it in, and Scott was kind of good about that. We got the guy, his teacher, and girl, and and the whole thing was it. But his family said, you made a mistake, it's not your fault. And that was the week before. And that happened.
Davies is the best.
I'm not working later than 7:30 a.m. Sunday is tomorrow. I have no idea. And I just done Monday. Yeah, she's coming with me to Florida. And
So I have this morning, I'm still to do something with them.
Give me 1 minute, I'll be back.
President Ed, services tonight, so I am not.
Is that what you said, Stephanie?
No, I'm saying for I'm the president.
Well, I know, but guys will want to see. Or you can look at some other projects.
Well, I got it, yeah.
I got the bagels right here. I just start one here from now. I have plans pretty soon after Shabbat, so it'd be better if we could talk tomorrow.
Okay.
Who wants to go out of there? Me.
Until tomorrow.
So the answer is you can do that. Because then you can excuses are. So.
You brought yourself? No idea. Responsible for you.
I asked.
It's my knowledge. I have to hear it from my mom. No, they're not roll.
You guys are staying, please join us, please go slightly further over. And I'm not offended either way, but. All right. I have a topic, but I'm also happy to take general, specific questions about honors at the bat mitzvah, probably not. But I'm also, if my grandmother, like maybe not that specific, but well, sort of general Hanukkah questions, I'm also game, just FYI.
Just like stump the rabbit.
A little bit. Like, why are my parents making me have a bat mitzvah?
We hear that all the time. Jack is your favorite hymn.
All right, so I have a little something to get us started in conversation tonight. And it is a very small hook that turns out to be a big deal. So tonight, if you were trying to follow on with the service, you'll notice that like when it was time to add the special prayer for Hanukkah, you had to like choose your own adventure. You had to like flip forward to page 430 and then get buy a Yeti and then flip back, right? It was like a whole, like it was a little bit of an adventure to find your page. The other prayer book that we sometimes use, the Art Scroll, it's right there. But there's actually a difference between the versions of the prayers of the two books, which you only notice if you go back and forth. And it is also a difference that comes up in the blessing for the Hanukkah candles. So let's remember now. Baruch atah she'asa nisim avotenu bayamim ha'em ba'azman hazeh. Right? So that is the version we know. So it means, blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who did miracles for our ancestors in those days, Bizman Hazeh, at this time. So in those days, right, several thousand years ago, the days of Maccabees, Bizman Hazeh, at this season, right? It makes sense. However, if you look at the Al Hanisim in our prayer book, and you look at source 1, you will see I actually put a little vav there in bold. So some people add, and including our prayer book, Vayimim lahem u bazman hazeh, in those days and at this time. So how does it change the meaning of the blessing to add an and, right?
Makes it relevant.
It makes it sound exclusionary without it.
Okay, so say more. It's exclusionary of what?
Without that, it would be assumed that it doesn't include the current period, rather we're reflecting on a historical situation. And so by purposely adding the and, it clarifies that in fact we're taking this to the present.
So for example, the sentence is, let's eat latkes, Grandma, and let's eat latkes and Grandma are very different in their meaning, right? And definitely should change the meaning of the sentence. Did you ever figure out about your great grandma on the other side? You ever had that conversation? Okay, good. We'll talk about it. All right. So adding that and, right? So let's see if we can unpack this. So if we say Vayamim lahem bazman hazeh, means in those days at this season of the year. By adding and, it's in those days and now. And so if you go through some of the traditional prayer books, the very earliest prayer book that we have, which is called the Machzor Vitri, actually has the version with the Vav in it. So for the miracles and salvation and heroics and battles, redemption and salvation you did for our ancestors in those days, and at this time, period, in the days of Matishahu, blah, 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 and just as you did miracles and heroics for ancestors in those days at this time, so do with us wonders and miracles for good at this time. So what is the Machzor Vitri trying to say? And he's almost 1,000 years ago. It was a long time ago writing this prayer book. If you think back to what was going on about 1,000 years ago being a Jew in France, it's not a great time to be a Jew in France, right? There were crusades, it was not fun. So I don't know, any other thoughts on that? Like, what does it mean to say? What are the implications of that?
It would seem to me that what they're asking for is that same salvation to happen in our time, so our time should be good.
Right. So you did miracles in those days, and you should do them in ours. Right? It's not that you do them in ours, but a lot of times in our prayers, by the way, we are passive aggressive. It's not just at home with teenagers. So for example, we say, blessed are you who heals the sick, right? So we don't say, please heal the sick, we say, you heal the sick. You know, we don't say, God, please forgive us, we say, God, who is a forgiving God. So we're kind of saying, this is what you do, rather than saying, please do it, we just sort of say, you're gonna do it, right? It's almost like, it's like saying, thank you for the cake. I haven't given you cake now. Well, you wouldn't want me to pray in vain, would you, right? So this is, that maybe is the implication of Machzor Vitri. fast forward about 600 years, and you have the Maharshal, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, who leaves out the book. He says, in the blessing who did miracles, I remember my teacher used to say, who did miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time, right? And so it's its meaning that he did miracles in those days that passed, specifically at this season, right? So it's, when did the miracles happen? On the 25th through the 25th of Kislev through the 2nd of Tevet, right? At this season of the year, right? No miracles in, Cheshvan, no miracles in, maybe there was a miracle in Adar, but it was a different miracle, right? The miracle of Purim, right? But there's the miracle that we're celebrating is one that only happened at this time. So fast forward a couple hundred years further.
Do you know why he chose to reverse that?
So there were different versions of the text out there. Maharshal is actually also, in general, ornery. Right when he was writing, there was a code of Jewish law called the Shulchan Aruch that was becoming very popular and is now actually, at the moment, even 500 years later, considered the most authoritative code of Jewish law. And he said, didn't say it literally, he said metaphorically to the writer of the Shulchan Aruch, who died and made you Moses, right? Because the Shulchan Aruch chose certain rules and rulings, right? There were 3 opinions, the Shulchan Aruch picked one. And so Shlomo Luria often disagreed. So for example, there is a tshuva of his, there's an opinion of his that often gets trotted out. So the practice is now more or less universal in traditional circles that if you are a Jewish male, that you are wearing a head covering, and in the Orthodox world, that you wear one all the time. And Rabbi Luria wrote a whole thing saying, and if I can paraphrase, this is redunculous, right? It does not say anywhere in the Torah that you have to wear a head covering. Don't make it into a mitzvah. It is a lovely practice, but wearing a tallis is much more important than wearing a kippah. And here are the reasons, if you have a headache, I'm not going to make you wear a kippah. There's all, if you're playing basketball, keep a kippah on, right? If you're losing your hair, right? Not looking at anyone specific, right?
Thanks for that one.
I can speak to that.
This morning, there was this poor guy who was clearly it was his first bar mitzvah ever, and he just was not, the technology was failing him. And he had the clip, and I'm like, dude, that's not going to help you.
My grandfather felt that a 3-inch light bulb solved it.
Anyway. But look, a 3-inch light bulb would solve the problem of keeping a kippah on your head, would cause others.
Exactly. Seriously.
Alright. So, anyway, so fast forward a couple hundred years to the second page. The Taz is one of the main commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. So, Luria loses out, and let's see what the Shulchan, and he quotes an earlier opinion. One should say, in those days and at this time, with and, to include all the miracles done for our ancestors, and to specify that miracle, because now there is a taste of that event, because this very day, or every day, God does miracles for us, hidden and revealed, as he did for our ancestors, also revealed as hidden. And so what he is saying is that, in fact, Bayamim uvazman hazeh, says the Labush, because in fact God is doing miracles for us all the time, and you don't realize it, right? So we were concerned we were not going to have a minyan, and in walk the trumpeters, and we have 10 and a spare, right? So there you go, right? Miracles every day. You're I did not experience it as a miracle, even a little bit, said it out. Right? In fact, right, the face of a child can say so much, especially the mouth part of that face. Right? There you go. So, but I don't agree with the Labush. For if so, then why would he say in those days? Well, when else would it have been? That's when they lived, right? You would have just said, I don't say and in those times. She'asa nisim lavotenu bazman hazeh. Right? You just say who did miracles for our ancestors at this time. Right? I don't need in those days, because When else would he have done miracles for them? Like, not after they died, not before they were born, right? The only time he could have done miracles for our, so you actually don't need Bayamim Hahem, right? Because in those days, because when else would he have done miracles, right? So if you're going to say in those days, in ours, adding, that implies that he also did it in those days, otherwise why are we saying it? Does that make sense? Right? Like, sort of like, if you just say who did miracles at this time, for our ancestors at this time, the assumption is he did not do miracles for our ancestors in 2024 or 25. He did miracles for our ancestors in the Middle Ages, or in the year 165 BCE. So by saying, Bayamim Hahem, Bazman Hazeh become superfluous, or it's saying specifically at this season. Therefore, it certainly was in those days. So if you say at this time without an, a miracle was done for our ancestors. Therefore, you should say, in those days at this time, as if you were saying that in those days, meaning on the 25th of the month, meaning the beginning of Hanukkah. And furthermore, if you pass a place where a miracle was done for him, he should say the blessing, Baruch was done a miracle for me in this place, rather than and in this place, to include other than miracles. Rather, this is not the correct language at this time. It is a mistake to say and at this time, and so is my humble opinion. Right? So saying, but the Taz if you say in those days and at this time, you are saying that he did miracles for them and for us. So the debate you see lining up, which granted is kind of riveting, but maybe not, but actually is kind of deep, which is the question is, like, is God doing miracles in our day or not? Right? So that God did miracles for the Maccabees, if you're celebrating Hanukkah, is not a subject for debate, right? Right, that is assumed, otherwise you're at Our Lady of Perpetual Service down the street, right? You are assuming, right, if you're celebrating Hanukkah, that there were miracles in the days of our ancestors. The question is, does do miracles in our day? So there you have it. And I'll give you two last sources, and then a little asterisk, and then we have time for whatever else is on your mind. So the Aruch HaShulchan is kind of a rewrite of the Shulchan Aruch, and this is only about 150 years ago. This is a condensation of the Shulchan Aruch, but adding a lot of different material. So basically someone's like, I'm going to kind of take my own take on things after 350 years later. And so he says the second blessing for candlelighting is who has done miracles for our ancestors in those times, those days at this time. And it might seem that this is double language, but it seems to me that since they wrote that one has to say at this time and not and at this time, right, it would seem that there are those who had and at this time. So he is writing 150 years later, 350 years later. In his day, everyone is saying, Bayamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh. Everyone is leaving off the and. And in fact, he has read the Taz who says, don't add the word and. Which is like, I don't know, who would have added the word and? No one's added the word and in 350 years. But he's like, since the Taz tells you not to add the word and, someone must have been doing it. Right? This is actually a good thing to think about, right? If the Torah takes the time, or if a rabbi takes the time to say don't do something, it's because someone has already thought of doing it, right? I'm not coming up with suggestions, right? If I say, please keep your cell phones put away during services, it's not because no one ever had the idea to have their cell phone out during the service, right? It's because I can look, and there's people sitting like this in their book, right?
In their book.
Right? I appreciate that they're at least being, like, okay, like you're gonna pee in my leg, at least tell me it's right? Like, okay, like the 10 Commandments: don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal. It's not because no one had ever thought of these things, right? Like you say, don't do something because people are doing it. Now, granted, adding an and to the prayer is probably not on the level of adultery or murder, probably. Okay, go on, yeah.
And a rabbi who said he knew that they could taste it good, because there's no point in banning it if people would eat it.
Right, fair enough, right? So, it would seem that those who said and at this time, in my humble opinion, that is the right answer for the real miracle, which was that the Hasmoneans defeated Antiochus, did not happen on the 25th of Kislev, rather during the many days when they defeated them. And at this time, there was only the additional miracle of the vial of oil that they found. So this is actually an interesting take. So God did miracles for our ancestors at more than one time. So yes, there was the miracle of the oil, which happened on the 25th of Kislev. But right, the other miracle was that the few defeated the many, right? The Maccabees defeated their enemies, right? Right now we kind of take it for granted that, the Jews are gonna, we're gonna defeat a superior enemy, that's what we do, right? But in the days of the Maccabees, right, they were fighting against the Greeks, one of the greatest empires in the world, or it was actually 1/3 of the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire had split. There were the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Syria, and some other folks in actual Greece. But we were fighting against a powerful empire, and it was just a bunch of guys with beards and sticks, basically. And yet we defeated them in battle multiple times, though we were outnumbered. But that didn't happen on Hanukkah, right? So the Maccabees won the war over a period of 3 years. Hanukkah is just when they lit the candles. So if we're really thinking about what the miracle of Hanukkah is, if you think the only miracle of Hanukkah is they lit some lights, okay, great. Not saying that's a bad miracle. But by the way, there's a whole other miracle, which is that we won the war to be able to light the lights to begin with. And so what Rav Shulchan is saying is that the miracle of Hanukkah wasn't just at Hanukkah, but actually took place in the months previous, because that's when they won the war. So this is not a one-day miracle. Similarly, in the blessings, we say the same blessing over the Megillah. She'asa nisim lavoteni b'amim hahem b'zman hazeh, who did miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time. The miracle of Purim did not take place on Purim at all. So the Jews defeated their enemies the day before the day we celebrate as Purim, right? Because we celebrate as Purim the day when they rested after killing all their enemies, not the day when they won the battle. But even more so, the Feast of Esther was the main miracle was changing Ahasuerus' mind, which was long before, because the Feast of Esther was on the second day of Passover, and it was from that time that Haman's pursuit began. 13th of Adar was the miracle before the nation when the Jews killed their enemies. So basically, on Purim, there are actually two different miracles. There's the miracle that Ahasuerus changed his mind and said, you can defend yourself. And then there's the miracle that, at least it was the day before, but it was still at this season, that the Jews defeated their enemies. So too, on Hanukkah, there were two miracles in ancient times. There was the miracle that we won the war, and the miracle that we lit the menorah. And so by adding the and, we're remembering both. So fast forward to the 20th century. Yabia Omer is Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the most important Sephardic rabbi in the 20th century. And he says, see the book Emunah Chochamim. It supports the version and at this time, because also in these times precisely, there arises the heavenly spirit from whose sake this miracle was done, and worthy events are rolled over to worthy times. And many early sources include the Vav, the Taz were rejected, so did the Maharshal. Therefore, it seems to me that to start with, you should say Bazman Hazeh without the Vav. One who includes it should not be rejected. You can go either way. So now, fast forward. Our prayer book actually, in the Al-Hanisim, includes the Vav. Right? So, because the editors of the Al-Hanisim, the editors of the Red Siddur that we use, are always basically just trying to make a point. Like, they're like, well, if we're going to print a new Siddur, we have to change something to make it worth buying a new Siddur. But I want to add one other idea, and this is actually kind of the neat takeaway, which is, in the days of almost everyone else that we read, if you were looking for miracles for the Jews, they were relatively small. Oh, the Crusaders didn't massacre all of us. That was a miracle. In the last 75 years, right, there has been the establishment of the State of Israel, which many people see as a miracle in and of itself, right? A country which it is outnumbered, the odds are against it, and yet keeps on sticking around. And so, in fact, in the conservative movement, we've added an Al-Hanisim, like the same way we add a prayer for Hanukkah and Purim, we add an Al-Hanisim for Hanukkah. Not for Hanukkah, for Israel's Independence Day. Saying that Israel's Independence Day was a miracle in our day. So in fact, right, they're making a theological point by adding the and back in. The editor of this Siddur is saying, I have news for you, miracles didn't only happen 2,000 years ago, or 2,100 years ago at Hanukkah, didn't only happen 2,500 years ago at Purim. they are happening in our days, we are seeing them. So in fact, it's not that, like, one of the rabbis said, well, there are hidden miracles happening even now, but no, in fact, look around you, there are miracles that you can see. And so therefore you should say, because there are miracles going on even now that are as great as the miracle of Hanukkah, right? The fact that you can walk down the street in Israel and like buy latkes and jelly donuts and light a menorah, right, is something that all the other guys in this page would not have imagined happening until the Messiah came. And yet here we are. So the idea is that, in fact, in some sense, right, that we are living in a time of miracles, is what you say by adding the and. And so for the folks who lived in the Middle Ages, that was like a little bit of a stretch, because like, have you seen the Middle Ages? Right, they weren't a fun time, right? And by the way, it's not like the last century has been great for Jews either, right? Some horrible things have happened to us, right? And yet, to say we live in a time of history, right, that history didn't end with the prayers and the dusty books, but history is still ongoing, and God is still doing miracles for us, that's actually a pretty remarkable claim. But it also, I think, says something about how you see the world we live in today. So, right, when you have your bat mitzvah in 2 weeks, it will be. All right, so questions, comments, thoughts?
And two, the first one you might even be able to answer with a yes, no. Do you think you would have enjoyed being a contemporary at times? And interacting?
I would have loved to schmooze with him. I like living in a time when there are antibiotics. I think it's like, I would say that like living the 1600s was not a great time to be a Jew in Europe. You know, there were.
More in terms of the interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, it's not like there is an absence of Jewish intellectual life today, right? So look, the Taz had a lot less to learn because he didn't have to learn the commentary of the Taz, right? You know, it's actually, I mean, this is actually true in general of human existence. Hey. The amount that you needed to learn no, I know that. The amount that you needed to learn to be a Jew, right, or to be anyone, right? In order to be a Greek philosopher, you didn't actually have to know all that much, right? In order, almost any field you can think of, there wasn't that much that you needed to know. But fields have gotten more and more subdivided, right? So now, right, to be a doctor now, there's a lot more that you need to know than you did 100 years ago. You needed where to cut in order to amputate a limb, and that was about it. You even had to know how to wash your hands back then, right? Right. So there's, in most fields, there is much more that you need to know to be an expert, and I think that's true in Judaism also. I think to be in order to compete as a rabbi today, certainly in the traditional world, there's a lot more that you need to know. And even in the non-traditional world, there's a lot of other stuff that they expect you to know that was not on the books back then. Doesn't mean that people didn't necessarily know it, right? But when you look at these thick books, that people were still writing that stuff. They didn't need to know it because it hadn't been written yet. So for example, if all you had to know was what it said in the Talmud, you can learn the whole Talmud in a couple of years. Of the Ecclesiastes says, of the making of books there is no end. So
we celebrate Hanukkah. The Christians do not. We understand the reason that the book of the Maccabees was not included in our Bible. My question is, why is it that the Christians elected to include that, considering its importance apparently that we don't?
So one is the books of the Maccabees, as we have them, are in Greek. And so we weren't going to put a Greek book in the Bible. The issue is that the Bible, the rabbis, when they were putting together the Bible, said we are only going to take books that were written as we feel under divine inspiration. And they sort of said categorically, any book written after this date doesn't count, right? Because, like, in specific, it was only written by people who had had some form of contact with, once the second temple was built, prophecy stopped, is what they say. So basically, if you look, that is when the end of all the books. And so the idea for us is that we are saying there's a lot of other great books out there, but to be in the Bible, you've got to be really special. Whereas the Christians, right, they're coming up with a whole New Testament, right? And so therefore, it makes sense for them to include books written between the end of the Jewish Bible and between what they're interested in. Because...
So they saw no reason to excise.
Right. Well, the other thing is that there was not necessarily a single Christian canon. If you read even now between different flavors of Protestants and Catholics, there's actually whole books of the Bible that exist only in Old Church Slavonic, which is a language that I don't know. Right. So there were hundreds and hundreds of books that were written that, at some point, a bunch of Christian scholars got together and said, they voted, these books are in our Bible and these are not. These are in the Old Testament, these are in the New Testament. And they really vary, and even now, from sect to sect, they will vary. So, like, some Christians have extra chapters of the book of Esther we don't have. So, there you go. All right, we are going to do, we're kind of on the grace after meals, and we are going to then have the evening service in about 4 minutes. Shir Hamalach B'Shuv Adonai Yeshua Tziyanu B'Kol Azimalek Tzafinu Ushonenu Rima Ad Yomru V'Goyim Yikvil Adonai L'Asot Imelech Yikvil Adonai L'Asot Imanu Ayinu Semechi Shuv Adonai Yeshivitenu Kafikim B'Negev Vedima Verima Yitzarim Halak Yelechu B'Avo Nosei Meshech Hazara Bo Yavo Berima Nosei Alumos Page 44. Rabbataya Barat. Yishem Nachman Talam Yishu Kabaraya Barat. Shechanu Yishalom. Rosh Hashanah Yishalom Tochim Roshma Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Hasan et Olam Kulo B'Tuva V'Echen V'Chesed V'Rachamim V'Noten Lechem L'Chol Basar Ki Le'olam Chaskal U'Tuva HaGadol Tani L'Chasalanu Ve'Lo Yasar Lanu Mason Le'olam Ba'ed Ba'avor Shem HaGadol Kiwazanu Farnes L'Hakol U'Mitiv L'Hakol U'Mitiv Masan Kol Briotap Asher Barab Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan et Hakol. Page 46. Bazman Hazan. That's really convenient. And Shabbat is over. I'll see if we can get some people to jump in and start the evening service and all right, email ends.
Sorry. That's right, it's you. You almost made it. I don't think you do this.
So I don't make a difference.
It's not.
All right, we're gonna take the red books back and page 264. You page 264 in just a moment.
Calendar of this, please.
Thank you.
Here. Are you able to stay for like 10 more minutes?
Okay.
Because I'm gonna come up with one more so we have to-
Oh, okay.
Page 264 in the middle of the page. Israel. Page 265, together the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad. Ve'ata Adonai Elohecha, v'chol elocha, v'chol ashercha, v'chol me'odecha, v'ha'yom ha'devarim ha'eleh, asher Elohim esavecha, yom Elohecha, v'shinata v'vanecha, v'dimar tabam, v'shivcha v'beitecha, v'lechtecha v'derech, v'shafacha v'necha, v'shartam lo'cha v'yadecha, v'yudotach v'beinecha, v'v'tacham amazuzot v'beitecha, v'yisarecha. 266. Adonai Elohim, Amen. Two 67. Malchuto broken Kiguola, and Moshe Meshach and Shravis Marabah and Kulam. Mi Kamocha Elim Adonai, Mi Kamocha Nedar Bakodesh. Mehora Zenivo, Kosek Melech, Makuta Kavanah, Says Edian Yamru, Adonai, Love, Yolam Baed, Benemar, Hirakov, Ugon Safin, Rutanagam, Israel. Bottom of 267. Shmor 18, Yolin, Notalam, Rokat Israel. We're going to turn ahead to page 270 through 278, the Amidah individually, and you'll notice when we get to page 277 at the bottom, we flip ahead for the special prayers for Hanukkah. Just the maintenance stuff you can hear in the chat. Hey. Judy Barkin has a yard site and we are short. So I was texting in the family group chat to see if you could come over, send someone over or hop on the Zoom. Okay. So if you could, that'd be great. You want me to send you the link? What? Wendy.
Thank you.
Okay. What?
I just tilted the calendar.
Okay, well, here we go. I need it back here for the morning anyway. See, I was thinking, when I said a friend, I was thinking Carol, not the other guy. But
Thank you. That would have been a no, big time.
okay. All right, let's wrap this up. All right, we are going to turn to page 281 for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabbat l'adon hakol la'aseh gedula le'otzer b'reshit shelo asanu k'goyei ha'arasot v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem v'gol ra'heinu k'chol ha'onam ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כתוב מלך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ויום ההוא ויום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו. And tonight we are remembering Jonathan Larkin and remembering Sarah. Thank you. Page 282. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yoma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv imramein Yehi shmeramam horach l'vam yomaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel shmei d'kudasham v'elam mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nekamata Amiram be'alma v'imramein Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya b'chaim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imramein Oseh shalom v'imramav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Thank you. All right, we will light candles and have Havdalah. And if people need to run, you are excused. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehatikder she'echad Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam she'asa nisim l'avoteinu b'yamim ha'arim Alright, and let's see, a match perhaps? From the shamash, absolutely. You can use the shamash to light your blunt, whatever you want. Alright. You know, like Adam Sandler sings, right? All right.
Nothing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh meorei ha'esh amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ha'mavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'ami ben yom hashvi'i v'sheshet yevei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai ha'mavdil ben kodesh lechol. That was sizzling.
Trick in.
This might be bourbon, I don't know.